something tore through my mind, sharp and wrong, and for one heartbeat I could not tell if the pain belonged to me or to my daughter. I am the queen of the Ashari Dominion, and for 300 years I have felt every mind in my empire at once, like 1,000 small lights burning steady in the dark. That night, one of those lights went out and came back as a scream. I was seated on the high tier of the ceremony hall when it happened. The hall was full that night, every tier packed with broodmothers, advisors, and soldiers who had survived a war none of them wished to fight again, all gathered to watch the one ceremony that binds our entire empire into a single mind for a single hour. The autumn resonance had just begun, the 1 hour each year when every mind in my empire joins into a single voice. It is supposed to be the safest hour we have. No one can hide a blade inside a room where 1,000 minds are watching as one. No one, it turned out, except a man whose mind none of us can hear at all. Ethan Cole was seated 3 rows below my throne, in the place kept for human guests, when he saw something the rest of us could not feel. He told me afterward that he had not even been watching the crowd. He had been watching my daughter, the way he always seemed to be watching her, and he saw her eyes snap toward the eastern doorway half a second before anyone else in that hall understood that danger had already walked through it. There was no time for a warning. He simply moved. I did not see the blade. I only felt the resonance shatter, 1,000 minds ripped out of their calm at once. And underneath all that noise, one single voice, my daughter, screaming words that were not even her own language. I do not remember crossing that hall. I only remember arriving and finding Ethan on the floor with his side torn open, and my daughter's hands pressed hard against him, red to the wrist, shaking too badly to speak. We looked up at her anyway. His breathing had already gone thin and fast, the kind of breathing our healers later told me means a human body has begun shutting itself down simply to survive. And somehow, through all of that, he still found a way to smile at her. "I am okay," he told her. "Look at me. It is not as bad as it looks." It was exactly as bad as it looked. Our physicians carried him into the deepest medical chamber in the palace, a room usually kept only for members of the royal brood line, because I ordered it myself, and no one in that hall was foolish enough to argue with a queen who still had her own daughter's blood on her hands from kneeling beside them both. A young human engineer named Grace Alden, part of the small delegation living among us, was pulled from her quarters in the middle of the night to help. She had spent months teaching our healers how a human chest is built, which organs sit where, how human blood carries breath through the body in a way ours never has. That night, all of that quiet teaching became the only thing standing between a healer's uncertain hands and a man who might die from simple unfamiliarity rather than the wound itself. I stood outside that chamber with my daughter beside me, and for the first time since I took this throne, I did not know what to do with my own hands. To understand why any of this mattered so deeply to me, you would need to go back 2 years, to the worst week of a war my people rarely speak of anymore. An Ashari scout crew crashed inside human territory during that war, half drowned in their own blood, surrounded by an enemy who had every right in the galaxy to let them die where they lay. The ship had gone down in a forest that human soldiers had been ordered to hold at any cost, in the coldest week of that year's fighting. By every rule either side followed back then, those 3 soldiers should have been left exactly where they fell. Ethan Cole was 26 years old then, working as a combat medic for the humans who found them. He did not let them die. He spent 11 hours with his hands inside bodies that were nothing like his own, using tools built for humans to save 3 Ashari soldiers who would have gladly killed him only days earlier. When his own commanders later asked him why he had bothered, his answer was simple enough to unsettle an entire empire. They were hurt, and I happened to be there. We do not have a word for that kind of thinking. Our people understand debt. We understand duty, and the long, careful ledgers that track exactly what one hive owes another. We do not have a word for helping something only because it is suffering and you are able to ease it, expecting nothing back in return, not even gratitude. That single choice ended the war faster than any treaty ever could have. When the rescued soldiers finally came home and I asked them mind to mind what the humans had done to them, all I felt was confusion, and underneath that confusion, something close to gratitude that had nowhere else in our culture to go. So when peace was finally signed, I invited Ethan Cole to live among us for a full year, so that my people could study the strangest thing about humanity up close, the very thing that had ended a war none of us had known how to end honorably. I placed my own daughter in charge of his time here. It seemed a fitting task for an heir, someone measured and controlled, a woman who had never once let her feelings slip during open court. I did not expect her feelings to slip constantly, and only ever around him. I first noticed it during a trade meeting, weeks after his arrival. He was folding a piece of human bread around some fish at the guest table, something he later told a healer he preferred because our formal 9-course meals felt like far too much for an ordinary afternoon. My daughter was meant to be reviewing tariff numbers with one of my senior advisors. Instead, I felt her attention drift toward him 3 separate times within a single hour, each time followed by something warm and quick that she tried, quite badly, to hide from the rest of the hall. I have known the difference between fear and love in my own daughter's heart since the day she hatched. What I felt from her that afternoon, watching a man fold bread, was not simple fondness, and it frightened me more than I wanted to admit even to myself. I said nothing that day. A queen who reacts to every flicker inside her daughter's heart stops being a queen and becomes only a nervous mother, and I have not held this throne for 3 centuries by behaving like a nervous mother in front of my own court. But from that day forward I began to watch. Over the following weeks, I learned that my daughter visited the human quarters far more often than her official duties required. One night, unable to sleep myself, I walked past her chamber and heard it before I saw it. My own daughter laughing so freely that for a moment I did not recognize the sound as hers at all. Through the open door, I saw them both bent over a small table scattered with human playing cards, Ethan explaining some rule she had clearly broken again, and Vesa laughing so hard she had to set her cards down. I stood in that corridor far longer than I should have, simply listening to a sound I had never once heard from her in 400 years of life. I asked my most trusted advisor, a woman named Mira who had served me since long before my daughter was born, whether she believed this human might be manipulating Vesa somehow. Mira's answer came slowly, because she understood exactly what I was truly asking beneath the question. "I do not believe he is using her," Mira told me. "I believe your daughter has simply never met anyone who laughs the way he does. None of us have. She does not know what to do with the feeling, because our people never gave her a proper ceremony for it." That answer did not comfort me at all. If anything, it worried me more than silence would have. So I chose to observe him myself, quietly, which a queen is technically not supposed to do to any guest under her own formal protection. I did it regardless. I found him 4 days later in the lowest medical hall of the palace, kneeling on cold stone beside an injured worker named Kesh, someone so far beneath royal notice that our own healers rarely even bothered recording her name in the official ledgers. Ethan either did not know that, or simply did not care. He had been sitting beside her for 6 hours already, speaking quietly about a human sport involving a bat and a ball, something entirely meaningless to her chances of survival. When a healer eventually asked him why he bothered, since Kesh could not even understand his words, his answer stayed with me long after I left that hall. "Scared people should not be left alone," he said. "Even if they cannot understand a single word you are saying, the voice matters more than the sentence ever does." Kesh lived. I do not believe his voice alone saved her, yet I noticed something our own physicians had failed to achieve in years of treating workers of her caste. Her fear had gone quiet in his presence, quieter than anything else in our entire hive had ever managed. Standing in that doorway, I finally understood what my daughter's heart had been trying to tell me for weeks. It was not manipulation. Mira had been right about that much at least. It was something far more difficult to guard against than manipulation. It was honest admiration, growing quietly into something a mother cannot simply order to stop once it has already taken root. I decided that same night to speak with my daughter plainly and settle the matter before it grew any further. I told myself there was still time. There was not. 9 days later, a faction within my own court, a family that had lost more daughters to the war than any other house, and had never forgiven the peace for asking them to simply stop fighting, decided the treaty could only end one way. They planned to kill the human ambassador during the single ceremony where no mind in the empire could sense danger approaching, and let the rest of my people believe I had quietly ordered it myself. They very nearly succeeded, and the only reason they did not was a man with no mind we could hear at all, watching my daughter the way he always did, who noticed danger half a second before the rest of us felt anything. Which brings this account back to that chamber, and to me standing outside it, waiting to learn whether the man who had just saved my daughter's life would live long enough to see her again. Vesa did not leave that hallway for 11 full hours. She did not eat. She barely spoke at all, except once, near the very end, when she turned to me with his blood still dried along her fingers, and asked a question I did not have a kind answer for. "Did I do this to him, Mother? Did he only stand in front of that blade because it happened to be aimed at me?" I gave her the truth, because she deserved nothing less. He stood in front of that blade because that is simply the kind of man he is. It happened to be you standing behind him, but I do not believe it would have mattered a great deal who. The answer did not seem to comfort her. I doubt anything could have, in that hallway, on that particular night. Halfway through the waiting, a young healer burst through the doors, breathless, telling us his heart had stopped once already, and that they were working to bring it back. I have led armies. I have watched my own daughters die during their emergence. I do not remember ever feeling as helpless as I did standing in that corridor, unable to do anything at all except wait for a stranger's heart to remember how to beat. It started again. The healer disappeared back through the doors before I could even thank her. While we waited, members of my own advisory web began gathering in that corridor too, drawn by rumor faster than any messenger could have carried real news. One of them, an old broodmother from a minor house, told me quietly that this attack proved humans brought nothing but danger into our halls, and that perhaps the treaty should end here, tonight, before any more Ashari blood was spilled protecting a stranger. I did not answer her. I did not have the patience that night to explain that it was human blood being spilled to protect one of us, not the other way around, and that the stranger had very nearly died doing it. When the physicians finally opened that door, the head healer looked more exhausted than I had seen any Ashari look in decades. He told us Ethan's heart had stopped twice during the surgery, and twice they had brought him back using equipment sent directly from his own world at my personal order, transmitted at 3 a.m, because I refused to lose a human ally to our own simple ignorance after he had refused to lose my daughter to someone else's hatred. He would live. He would carry a long scar across his ribs for the rest of his short human life, but he would live. While he recovered, I turned my attention to the family who had ordered his death. I met their eldest broodmother myself, alone, in a chamber far from open court, and I did not raise my voice once, because a queen rarely needs to. I told her plainly that a house willing to endanger a guest under my own protection, simply to reignite a war already paid for in blood, had no further place inside my dominion. She did not argue. There was very little left for her to argue with. That house does not exist any longer, not in the way it once did, and I will not spend more words describing exactly how that ending was reached. On my way to see him, I passed Kesh in the corridor outside the medical hall, no longer wearing any mark of her own injury, carrying a small parcel of grain bread from the worker's own kitchen. She did not speak to me. She did not need to. I understood exactly where that bread was going, and for once, I felt no need to stop her. I visited Ethan myself 9 days later, alone, without a single advisor beside me, something I had not done for any guest in 300 years. He tried to sit up straighter the moment I entered, which made him wince, since his body had clearly not yet forgiven him for the chair he had used as a weapon against a blade meant for royal blood. I told him to stay still. He listened at once, which told me humans understand certain things about queens rather better than parts of my own court sometimes manage. I did not ask why he had thrown a chair at an armed assassin. The healers had already explained that part well enough. I asked him why any of it, the stranger named Kesh, the card games at strange hours, my own daughter. He considered the question longer than I expected before answering. I do not really separate those things out, he finally said. You see someone who is frightened or hurting, and you happen to be able to help them, so you simply do. That is the entire reason. I never once calculated what it might cost me first, not with Kesh, and not that night either. That is not a strategy, I told him. That is a weakness. A hive built on that single idea would not survive one full season. Maybe not, he said, but your daughter is the one who ended up on the floor holding my ribs together with her bare hands, screaming in a language she was not even using anymore. So I do not know, ma'am. Seems like it caught on anyway. I did not have an answer ready for that. I am not entirely certain I have found one even now. I found Vesa later that same evening, standing alone in the East Gallery, exactly where that blade had been meant for her throat, staring at nothing in particular. I understand now that staring at nothing is sometimes the most honest thing a person can do. You have been watching him since the very day he arrived, I said. It was not a question. Weeks of quiet worry had already earned me that much certainty. Yes, mother, she answered, without turning to look at me at all. I told her my fear exactly as it was, the way I should have told her weeks earlier instead of watching from a distance. I believed he had somehow won her over through some quiet strategy I could not see, some debt he intended to collect later, the way our own people are raised to expect from any kindness. I have watched him for 3 months, mother, she said. I have never once seen him ask what a kindness might cost him. That is not something a person can pretend for 3 months without slipping, not even once. I know, I told her. I asked him myself, and that is precisely what unsettles me. A person who never calculates cost is either careless, or he is the single most unpredictable thing this empire has ever welcomed through its own gates, because there is no debt to read in him, no ledger to weigh against his intentions. He is more dangerous, in his own way, than any enemy we have faced, and you have been staring at him since his very first day among us. My daughter turned to face me fully then, and for the first time across 400 years of her life, I watched her smile in a way I did not recognize, and did not, if I am entirely honest, mind learning to recognize. "Yes, mother," she said quietly. "I know exactly why I have been staring. I was only hoping you would understand it before you had me followed for a 4th week. I did not have her followed again. I did, however, extend Ethan Cole's place among us for as long as he wished to remain, over every objection my remaining advisors could raise, and without telling anyone what I had decided, I began the long, complicated work of deciding what an empire does when the very ambassador it once feared has clearly chosen to stay. My daughter still watches him across every hall we share. I no longer wonder why. I have begun watching him too, in my own way, from my own throne, learning slowly and carefully what a species this small, this soft and this reckless is truly capable of. The peace between our two peoples is still young, still fragile enough to break in a single night, as I learned the hard way inside that ceremony hall. There will likely be other houses, other quiet plots, other blades waiting for the 1 hour when no mind can feel them coming. I understand that danger now in a way I did not before, but I also understand something else for the first time. We do not have to face that danger alone anymore, not while a man willing to stand in front of a blade for a stranger still walks these halls beside my daughter. 300 years upon this throne, and I am still learning lessons I never expected to need. I find, to my own considerable surprise, that I am no longer afraid of what this particular lesson might one day cost me.